This episode is sponsored by Kantar. Too often, creative effectiveness is treated as a final check, not as a decision intelligence that helps shape campaigns while they're being built. Kantar's Link changes that. Link is an end-to-end creative effectiveness system built for modern, fast-moving campaigns. It brings together deep human and cultural understanding, AI-powered optimization, and decision intelligence embedded directly into creative workflows. Drive stronger campaign performance and brand growth with Link by Kantar. Visit try.kantar.com/adage.
Women's sports are attracting bigger audiences, richer media deals, and more attention from marketers. Yet brands are still underestimating the opportunity. Why that gap exists and what marketers can do about it is what we'll be talking about today with Haley Rosen, founder and CEO of Just Women's Sports, on the Marketer's Brief, our weekly discussion of marketing news and trends that have the industry buzzing. Rosen is a former athlete who founded the media company 6 years ago. We discuss why she believes that covering women's sports like sports, and not like a lifestyle, is critical to the category's growth. She will also share what marketers can learn from Just Women's Sports partnerships with brands such as Ally and TurboTax. I'm John Springer, senior reporter at Ad Age, and this is the Marketer's Brief podcast. Haley Rosen, welcome to the Marketer's Brief podcast.
John, thank you for having me.
We're so glad you're here. Women's sports, it's grown like crazy. How have you made sure that the growth can translate for loyalty for Just Women's Sports and not just the category?
It's a really good question. Look, I don't think it's an either or. I think more interest in women's sports is good for everyone building in this space. It creates more opportunity, it raises the floor, and it just, it's cheesy, but more is more. And so I think the interest in the category and the excitement around these athletes and these leagues, it's great for everyone building in women's sports. And also that does mean it's more competitive. There's more opportunities for consumers to go other places. And so I think for us, it's about continuing to lead the conversation. We are a media property. And so I think it's very important that our content breaks through, that our content is resonating with the fan base that is here and is also proving to bring in new fans and continue to engage and grow and expand that audience. And so for us, I think it's about just continuing to sharpen, continuing to level up, continuing to have the strongest, the best, the most content breaking through. I think for us, it's just about as this space levels up, we continue to level up with it.
Okay, and I kind of got ahead of myself here, but can you give a quick background of Just Women's Sports, when it was founded, what you do?
Yeah. So really quick background on Just Women's Sports. We are exactly what our name says, which is Just Women's Sports. I will say for a long time that was confusing. There was confusion of, are we women in sports? Are we, women around sports? This is literally, we cover the category of women's sports. And, really sort of our thesis is that legacy media is really well set up around the legacy properties. And what that means is, you look at some of the bigger players, they're a great infrastructure around the NBA, the NFL. Their temples are, those media companies' temples are really good at working with brand partners around those marquee moments. They build an audience that wants to engage with content around those leagues and properties. It's a really good infrastructure for those leagues. And it's not as simple as just add in more priorities. It's not as simple as add the NWSL. It's also not as simple as add the MLS. It's not really a men's or women's sports thing. It's that the legacy players have picked their priorities and they're not the women's sports league. So for me, it's been about, let's not bang our head against the wall and sort of beg them to go from 4% of coverage to 5%, but that's not what we're interested in. This is a category that can be, in my belief, is just as big, if not bigger than men's sports. Obviously there's a lot to go, but I think if you look at every metric, it points to that story being very possible. And so for us, we view our role as being the infrastructure for women's sports. So we prioritize soccer and basketball in the women's sports leagues. We have built an audience that wants that content first and foremost. We're really good at working with sponsors around those marquee moments. Those leagues' temples are our temples. We're an infrastructure that is designed to put women's sports first and foremost. And we've really built in a way to be a one-stop shop. So we have an editorial presence, social, original content and shows. We do events, we do merch. And that was really intended to meet fans wherever they were at and make it easy to be a fan, and also to be a one-stop solution for brands of however they want to activate in women's sports, we can be that single solution for them.
Okay. And your background, I think you were a professional athlete at one time.
I wasn't a great pro player, but I was a soccer player, played in college, played professionally for a little bit in the US and abroad. So that experience really did lead me to eventually starting just women's sports because I got to see the momentum in this space really firsthand. I think sort of before it was obvious, being in it, I could just see that there was so much excitement. And then when I stopped playing, it was almost like the music stopped. There was no way to follow the space just as a fan. And that to me just seemed like a huge white space opportunity.
Do you approach the assignment as an athlete might?
Probably. Hard to avoid it.
So, what does your audience actually want from just women's sports that they can't get anywhere else?
Yeah, good question. Look, there's obviously a lot more happening in women's sports, but I think it's important to say, like, I think the coverage overall has gone. I mentioned, when we started in 2020, it was 4% of sports coverage. That number is now, I think we talk about a number that's closer to 15. That 15% actually includes linear. And if you actually look at how much coverage has shifted, it's gone from basically just under 4% to just above 4%. And so I mentioned this not for doom and gloom, but just to say it's not a solution for women's sports to build and grow on legacy platforms. It's just simply not. And so for us, I think we proved that in fans come to us for really basic stuff, just easy news coverage of like we make it very easy to consume women's sports on our newsletter, on social, across our channels. Like there is a baseline that I think we almost take for granted in men's sports that, it's really easy to know when a player gets traded, what team is overperforming. I'm sure you couldn't help but hear about the NBA finals. Like there's just a baseline that exists. That baseline like hasn't existed in women's sports, and we view that as like that's a very critical role that we play. On top of that, we also think it's critical that we build the trusted voices in the space. So you hear the news, what is the reaction to the news? What's the opinion, the analysis? What are the personalities engaging and pushing the story forward? So for us, it's really important to own both of those layers of, hey, here's the news, and here's the people that you want to hear talking about the news, thinking about it, talking about it, analyzing it, bringing on other trusted voices to have these conversations. We really view that as like, we have to own that every single day. And I think that's like a very high value for anyone that wants to consume women's sports. I think the other thing too is women's sports is all we do. It's the priority, right? So when there are moments of NBA finals, which was great, but in the start of the WNBA season, we don't have to question what our priorities are. Our priorities are very, very clear, and that's good for fans and it's good for brands as well. And so I think for us, it's just, I started sort of with like the nuts and bolts and how we sort of serve that audience. But I think at the highest level, we are a platform that puts women's sports first and foremost and makes it really easy and fun to be a women's sports fan. We think that is like critical to this space growing.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned a little bit about this, but sort of which content formats have worked for you? And if anything that you've tried sort of surprised you that worked or maybe not worked and something you learned from?
Yeah, we are 6 years old, so we have tried a lot, and we've tried a lot that hasn't worked, and we've tried a lot that has worked, which is, I think, exciting for us in this moment that, as women's sports has really rise, we sort of have this playbook that's been tested and is really working right now, which is exciting. Look, this audience is young. 80% of our audience is under the age of 34, so it's heavily Gen Z and millennial. Digital is critical. These are not folks that are cutting a cord. They never had a cord to cut to begin with. So like digital native channels, I think has been really important. And then social and video is just really, really big for us. So everything we do on Instagram and TikTok, all of our YouTube content, all of our shows, our vodcasts, so video first podcasts, video is just a huge format for us. And we're seeing that really just with the younger demographic in general.
Okay. And I guess the question, what tells you that you're building something durable as opposed to something sort of benefiting from a hot market? Again, I don't want to put off women's sports as trendy at all, but what tells you that this is here to stay?
I think women's sports as a category still has more to go to prove it's here to stay. And I think all of the growth is still very much in front of us. So, I can share from our perspective, like there's obviously been a ton of dollars, like investment dollars going into teams and leagues in the category as a whole. I think that the sponsorship dollars are just starting to meaningfully move. And that actually makes me very bullish and optimistic. But let me share a bit more on this. The WNBA on average, I think it was last season, was seeing 85% of the viewership of NBA games on ESPN. So audience is very much there, very comparable to men's sports. Women's sports as a category sees 2% of the sponsorship dollars of men's sports. And so audience gap dramatically closing, sponsorship gap dramatically big, right? So I mentioned that because I think the first thing that's happened is the audience has showed up, people are excited, there's this an energy and momentum. The brands are coming, and I don't think they are here yet, but I think that is what makes me so excited, because I think we are just seeing like the tip of the iceberg of what this space will be, because brands and sponsorships are such a critical piece of the sports infrastructure, and that is just starting to shift. And so what will this be once brands are meaningfully investing, doing it regularly, when the budgets go up? But that's really, again, it's like so exciting. And I think as an industry, like we have to take that very seriously, because we're going to have a lot of brands that are going to be making investments for the first time, or making big investments for the first time. We have to deliver. We Just Women's Sports, but the teams, the leagues, we have to deliver and, make it a good return for them, which we know we can. We're seeing all the data that these investments are working. There's a reason brands are coming, because we're seeing that investing in women's sports is a great investment. But again, we have to continue to prove it and build it.
Right. We're speaking with Haley Rosen of Just Women's Sports. We're taking a short break, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to talk more about brands in women's sports.
This episode is sponsored by Kantar. Too often, creative effectiveness is treated as a final check, not as a decision intelligence that helps shape campaigns while they're being built. Kantar's Link changes that. Link is an end-to-end creative effectiveness system built for modern, fast-moving campaigns. It brings together deep human and cultural understanding, AI-powered optimization, and decision intelligence embedded directly into creative workflows. Drive stronger campaign performance and brand growth with Link by Kantar. Visit try.kantar.com/adage.
We're back with Haley Rosen. Haley, the ally partnership that you have with Just Women's Sports sounds like a real genuine alignment. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, why it works for you, and to the degree it does, what it could show that is possible for brands partnering with your media property.
I mean, Ally's been a great partner for a lot of years, and I think they deserve a ton of credit for being early movers in the space and really proving that this was a category that worked for brands. I think this year's been really exciting for us because we've been a partner of the NWSL for 5 years. Ally, I think, has been just as long, if not longer. And this is a partnership really around soccer content. And they've partnered with us to reach a core women's soccer fan. They're working with us on a show called The Late Sub, hosted by Claire Watkins. And what I really like about this is Claire is like really homegrown talent for us. She is incredible. She's like, we often compare her to, she's the Zach Lowe of women's soccer. Like, she just knows everything. Like, I love going to dinner with her and just picking her brain, because she has so much just interesting things to say and insight and opinions. And she has just built this like really organic audience of people that come to her, not because she was a former athlete, not because she has some great soccer pedigree, but because she's really smart at soccer and she gets it and she knows the history and she's been around the game for a long time. I think seeing Allies doing a year-long sponsorship of that show, we're doing in-person events around that show. And I think what was really cool about this one is, again, just a ton of natural alignment around the soccer. They've been a great partner for a long time, but actually seeing brands start to work with like real industry insiders that are getting it and building these organic audiences. I think that's like the next sort of frontier for brands as they're activating in women's sports. And we see a ton of that on the men's side. On the women's side, I don't think we're totally there yet. So I think it's just been a great partnership. And we kicked it off with the start of the NWSL season, and it's been great. And I think the most exciting part of that season, playoffs and championships, is really in front of us. So excited to see where that goes.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, I guess we talked a little bit about this, but what do the best brand partners understand about women's sports that the rest of the marketing world does not?
This is a really good question. Look, we as a company have made, we approach women's sports as sports, and we really treat this as a category that, you got to cover the fun, the good, the celebratory, and the bad and the ugly. And we just have to be real about it, because that's what people love about sports is like, there's a realness, it's entertainment, it's high highs and low lows, and people have opinions, and those opinions can differ. That's always been our approach. And I think when brands are open to that and excited to treat women's sports like sports and want to get into the game and want to have real, kind of meaty content and conversation, I think those end up being the best partnerships where we have seen the most return. I think of what we did with TurboTax around March Madness. We worked with on our show. Lisa Leslie hosts a show for us called Between the Lines, where she interviews basketball players in the WNBA, collegiate coaches. It's just like a really good show. Lisa's obviously incredible, but it's a real like honest, real conversation about the ups and downs of their journey and what they're going through, and very basketball first. And TurboTax was just a great partner, and like, letting that show be leaning into the basketball, leaning into the joy of that. We got to work together on a live show at March Madness, which is just like this big, awesome, rowdy, fun sports first event. And like that, those to me are the best partnerships. Just fun and just letting the content be real and organic and not kind of forcing women's sports to be something it's not, just letting it be and like letting the audience enjoy.
Yeah. You use this phrase, cover sports like sports. What do you mean by that?
I think we are sort of moving past this. So maybe it's time for me to let this one go. But early days, there was a lot of conversation around early days, right? Like I'm talking about 2020, but it was like, women's sports doesn't work. People don't care. People don't watch. So we have to treat it like lifestyle. We should focus on what these athletes are wearing and how they're doing their hair. We should be focused on targeting young girls and the aspirational stories. And listen, I'm not saying we shouldn't do any of that, but I am saying sports are sports. We love watching people compete at the highest level, and these are the best athletes in the world competing at the highest level. Let's start there. Like that is what people are going to get excited about. People love the US women's national team because they win World Cups and Olympics. They're the best, and it's so fun watching them do what they do on the field. And then you care about them as people, and maybe you want to follow them off the field, and then maybe you care about what they're wearing. But it starts on the court, it starts on the field, it starts on the track. And I think that's just like a very important thing to remember. And I do think we're getting there because I think it's hard to think about it differently when you see like what a Caitlin Clark's doing, what an Asia Wilson's doing, what a Trinity Rodman's doing. Like, they get people so excited about what they're doing in the run of play. But yeah, for a long time, I don't think as an industry we approach the space like that.
Mhm. Okay, so as you look forward, two questions, I guess, as you look forward. One being, what do you consider to be Just Women's Sports' biggest marketing issue?
Ooh. Look, I think what's exciting right now about women's sports is there's still a ton of white space and opportunity. I wouldn't say it's our biggest issue, but I feel urgency to grow, expand, do more. I think there is room for way more content around the WNBA, way more content around the NWSL, way more content around tennis. I think there's just opportunity for more right now, and audiences are hungry for that. And I think that everything we do, everything we invest in has to break through and has to be best in class. And so for us, I don't think it's a problem, but it's like, what are the things I think about is how do we make everything we do absolutely A plus top notch? And where can we do more? Where can we build out more in this space?
Okay, maybe an easier future question. You probably get a lot of intelligence from your audience. What are they interested in that might be under the radar still for most people?
It's actually like, I think a lot of people right now think that there's, okay, basketball and soccer are really well covered. So, like, what else is there? And there is more out there. There's so much. What's happening with the PWHL is very exciting. What's happening with college gymnastics, college volleyball, and the volleyball space in general, college World Series. But I think what surprises people is our belief is like there's still a lot more to go in sort of the biggest sports and the biggest leagues right now. An example I often give is, I think LeBron James has like 158 million Instagram followers, and Alex Morgan has 13 million Instagram followers. So it's just like a reminder that the biggest stars in women's sports, there's still a pretty big delta between the biggest stars in men's sports. And so I'm not saying, only cover one sport. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, I think there's a lot more fruit on the vine around the stuff that is like really working and breaking through in women's sports.
Great. So we've got time for one more. We ask all of our guests this question. Could you name somebody out in the brand world or a marketer who you admire and what you would like to ask of them if you could?
Yeah, I mean, back to Ally, and I will ask Andrea this because it's a good question. But next time I see her, I think my question for her, CMO at Ally, is what was the pushback when she advocated for Ally to invest really big in women's sports? What was said and how did she overcome it? And then what were the key stats that ultimately got, I think, her whole team on board, her company on board, but what would she point to for other marketers in the space?
It's a great question. Haley, thanks so much for joining us today.
John, thank you for having me.
That was Haley Rosen, CEO and founder of Just Women's Sports. And I'm John Springer, senior reporter at Ad Age. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and remind you that you can subscribe to The Marketer's Brief wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for this week. We'll see you next time.
Marketer's Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.